Hello and welcome to another edition of Great Britons. Yeah, would you believe it? And today we're going to be talking about Sir Barnes Wallis. So I hope you're going to enjoy the content. If you do, please would you click the like button. It's absolutely free, but it makes a big difference to us here in terms of the algorithms and all the other technical paraphernalia that goes with it, and also helps us push out more new content. So thank you if you would do that, if you're happy with the content. So, Sir Barnes Wallis, let's dig in and see what we can find out about this guy. He was an engineer. He was also an aircraft designer. He was a bomb designer and an all-round good egg. A really great guy. And the period in his life we're going to be looking at is the time during the Second World War. So that's 1939 to 45, as far as the UK is concerned. Now, Sir Barnes worked at Vickers, an engineering company. He had a senior role there and skillful designer and got involved in all sorts of things. I think at the outset of the war, really, I mean, Barnes was always messing around with different ideas at home as well as at work. An all-round boffin, really. But bless him, you know, he was working on this idea that he'd sort of picked up from childhood about kind of kicking stones across the sea or across a river or whatever. And it kind of occurred to him, well, I wonder if you could possibly do that with a very, very large thing, something as huge as a bomb, really. And it picked up on this idea, and it rigged up some sort of rudimentary thing at home, but wasn't really what he needed. He needed something on a much bigger scale to be able to test it. He lobbied a number of people in different sort of ministries, the Air Ministry, etc. And it's fair to say, despite the great respect that people had for him, that they thought this was a bit of a step too far. Really. I think people thought, well, hang on a minute, this is a bouncing bomb. Come on, come off it. Is this really going to work? Not to be deterred by this, Sir Barnes continued to lobby for this idea, and eventually people did give way and allow him to go forth and do some more testing. A big push for this, by the way, was the intervention of Winston Churchill, who Winston had heard of the idea and thought, well, if we can pull this one off, this is worth going for. So I think once it had gained the interest of Winston Churchill, the whole thing gained more traction, and he was allowed to continue. Barnes had recognised at the outset that different targets would require different solutions. So, for example, if you were aiming at shipping, or were you aiming at a small target on land, or were you aiming for larger targets? They would all need to be approached in a slightly different way. And so that was his first consideration, if you like. One of the things that the powers that be were very interested in, as a target, that is, were the large dams, rather, in Germany. They held large volumes of water. Obviously, they were used for hydroelectric purposes, and they were surrounded by lots of engineering. So, munitions factories, steelworks, all sorts of heavy industry, and these were a very tempting target to be able to take out if at all possible. The dams themselves, the big ones around the Ruhr Valley in Germany, they were actually protected by very strong torpedo nets. So conventional sort of torpedo bombing by an aircraft simply wasn't working. They'd get tangled up in the torpedo net, and then they would explode prematurely. So didn't really work, actually. And they were also protected by many anti-aircraft guns as well. So it made the whole thing of attacking them, how can I put it? It was a little sort of, it was unlikely to be successful, put it that way, for the efforts that would be required. So up until that point, they remained high on the list. However, we didn't have a solution to be able to go after them. So Sir Barnes had a number of challenges. Obviously, the avoidance of torpedo nets and what you could do to overcome that. Another, if you like, the explosive destructive power. So the water actually dissipates the pressure. So instead of the wall that's holding back the water, instead of the wall being damaged, all that's happened is that the power has simply been dissipated, which then led him on to the next thing, which was, right, well, if that's the case, then it's absolutely critical that the bomb must be absolutely right up against the concrete wall to deliver maximum destructive power. Not only that, if all the water was actually on the one side of the bomb, then the water would work in your favor rather than against you. The water would actually push the bomb and the destructive power from that. It would push it all in one direction towards the wall. He also recognized that in order to deliver the sort of destructive power that was needed, the bomb would need to weigh at least 4 tons. So, wow, that was quite something as well. So, with the intervention of Winston Churchill, things began to gather pace, and they got to a point where they were doing some local testing in and around the coast of the UK. Unfortunately, with an aircraft operating at normal sort of attack height, when it released the bomb, obviously a 4-ton bomb, when it hit the water, the whole casing of the bomb just disintegrated, basically. This was extremely disappointing for Barnes. And, yes, they tried further tests where the bomb casing was reinforced, but to no avail. So, again, a big disappointment. And so Barnes obviously had to retrench a little bit and give the whole thing some more thought. The RAF were very aware that they would need some absolute, top flyers in order to attack these dams. And so, with that in mind, a new squadron, 617 Squadron, was formed from the absolute cream of the crop. Some of the best flyers around the world were recruited to form 617 Squadron. And it was part, I guess, Barnes's early tasks to now inform them that, contrary to the previous instructions about the height of flying in order to deliver this bomb, that it would actually need to be 60 feet, which from memory I think is about 18 meters for the metrically minded, or the height of a decent sized tree. Yeah, and they're going to fly over a lake at night at 240 miles an hour. Which is enough to scare the hell out of anyone, I would imagine. Anyway, that was the task. The RAF boys, bless them, went off and practiced morning, noon, and night until they could do this with incredible skill. The actual mechanism itself that was being dropped, which often referred to as a bomb, wasn't really a bomb. It was much more akin to being a depth charge. The idea was it would obviously bounce along the surface. It would reach a concrete wall, and then the backward spinning motion of this depth charge would allow the charge to sink to a predetermined depth. And within the mechanism, there was a depth charge that actually fired the whole thing off. So basically, the idea being that if you could actually fire a mechanism, way down low towards the base of the structure, it would deliver but a much more powerful shock wave through it. The bombs were actually called golf mines as they backskimmed, similar to the way a golf ball does in flight. And Barnes had noticed that this helped the bounce of the bomb as well as its directional stability. So, yeah, that's where it went to. The dangers involving flying the mission cannot be overestimated. It really was something else. The RAF had already were fully aware that these dams were heavily fortified by anti-aircraft fire. The last thing that anybody would want to do was to pre-announce the arrival of Brits and give the enemy the chance to further strengthen its anti-aircraft fire. So it was ordered that the aircraft crews would have to fly at a height of what is described as 0 feet. In other words, a height which cannot be detected by radar. So this was scary stuff as well, because they were flying out to Germany and back again at night at a height barely above treetops. Really scary stuff, really scary stuff. The damage to enemy facilities, so that's factories, electricity, manufacturing, and indeed the mortality of people on both sides was quite significant. Despite that, the mission was hailed as a big success, and Barnes Wallis continued his career in engineering at Vickers, making other variants of bouncing bombs to hit other targets, and just generally messing around, making improvements and new inventions and all sorts of things. He really did have a very colourful career, and it's great to include him in this tribute to Great Britons. I do hope you've enjoyed the content. Please click the like button if you did, and I'll catch up with you soon. Bye for now.